Hello and welcome to a nighttime recorded episode of the World Wanderers podcast. One of the rare episodes we haven't recorded in the morning.
Yeah, that's true. We almost always record in the morning because our creative juices are flowing a little bit more. We didn't even introduce ourselves. I'm Amanda.
People know who I am.
Across the table from me, you all can't see him, but his name's Ryan. He's kind of cool. What are we talking about today, Ryan?
So today we are having a value-packed episode of how to not get murdered, raped, taken, blackmailed, extorted.
In South America? Thieved. I think it's mostly how to keep your stuff safe.
Yeah, the basic premise is it's the main habits that we adopted in South America and Asia to avoid getting our shit stolen.
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up nicely.
And how did that go for us?
I mean, it's gone well. I'm going to just casually knock on wood, but we've never had our stuff stolen before, so I think that we must be doing something right.
Yeah, I think we maybe play it a little bit safer than is necessary.
Yeah, I definitely do.
And there's obviously an element of luck involved in not getting mugged or pickpocketed or having nefarious stuff happen. But it seemed like when we were traveling around, in South America especially, if you, like, all the people we were hearing from who had ended up getting backpacks stolen, stuff like this, like, they all seem to be going against the conventional wisdom that we had heard at hostels and learned to follow. Like in Buenos Aires, they tell you don't be out at night in La Boca outside of the one area. Like,
and even there, it's like you need to be pretty cautious. And then it's like you hear somebody who got their backpack stolen with an expensive, like, DSL? Is that
SLR?
SLR camera and, like, passport, wallet, all of his money. It's like, well, why'd you have all that stuff on you? Well, I don't know.
Yeah, so lots of stories like that where it's like, oh, I was walking around at night by myself with my passport and my wallet, and it got stolen. And it's like, well, maybe that wasn't a good idea in the first place. So we're going to kind of go through a list of kind of tips, rules to follow to try to keep yourself more safe. And a lot of the common tricks that people use to end up getting you in a situation to steal your stuff, like, they're not particularly inventive. So if you know them, then when it happens, you're likely to respond well.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to start with if you're on, like, a train, a plane, or a bus. This is mostly for, like, buses and trains, though. But I would always recommend to keep your passport on your body. So whether, you can get those, like, little travel pouches, some just kind of hang around your neck underneath your shirt, and some go around your waist. And I know that they're not the most stylish things, but they're pretty practical when you're traveling in a third world country, because you never know, if you're going to fall asleep, or if you're traveling alone, if you have to go to the washroom and, you forget your bag or something. So it's nice to always have your passport on yourself.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, I used kind of one of those passport holders that kind of wraps around your waist and you kind of, like, tuck it into your pants. But one thing, when I started doing that, like when we were in Thailand, I would do that, but then I didn't have anywhere to, like, really hold my money, so I'd have to, like, go into there to get money, which is, like, definitely something you don't want to be doing. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're doing that, like, if you got some cash and maybe a passport in something like that, you never want to have to open that in, like, a public area. So, like, have a small wallet in your front pocket or something.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Like, having a little bit of cash easily accessible is always good, so you don't have to go into your, like, big stash, because the thing that people are attracted to is, expensive technology that they can't afford, and money. And so showing that off is definitely not the thing to do.
Yeah, and I don't remember what the expression was, but I remember in Ecuador and Colombia as well, they had like kind of an expression about, like it was like papaya. Like if you offer someone papaya, they're going to eat it. And they were using that to refer to your stuff. So like if you have a camera in your hand and don't have the strap on your wrist, it's kind of like offering someone papaya.
Oh,
is
yeah.
the analogy.
Yeah. And that's kind of like, that brings us to another point. Like if you're traveling with like an iPhone or, you know, one of those fancy Samsungs, I would be pretty like cautious with it. You know, use a camera that has a strap. It's a little bit cheaper on a day-to-day basis to take photos. Or if you're going to use your iPhone, be pretty careful with it. Like if you're just holding it up with sort of like 2 fingers on either side, it's pretty easy for somebody to run by and snag, especially if you're pretty focused on what you're taking a photo of. And you hear a lot of like grab and run type things with phones. You hear a ton of stories like that. There's a girl I met in Bali who had that happen to her.
Yeah. And the same thing for backpacks. Like I think if you've traveled much at all, you've seen people switch them around to the front. But if you haven't done much traveling, you kind of feel like a bit of an idiot. But if you're in a crowded area, even in Europe or anywhere else, yeah, if you put your backpack around to the front and protect it instead of leaving it on your back, because someone will the chances of getting stuff stolen in a crowd with a backpack on your back are just extremely high.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, if you're really opposed to doing that, I would just suggest that you put your valuables in a really hard to reach place. Even if you're just like walking and talking, you know, with a friend or in a group, you never know. Like people are, you know, there's a lot of people out there who make their living off of pickpocketing and they're really good at what they do. So it's like they'll get into the outside pockets without you even realizing that they've done that. I know the first time I went to Peru, my friend and I were walking with big backpacks on our back and small backpacks on our front. And a guy followed us for about 3 blocks. And when we got back, she had a pouch on the outside of her big backpack that was open. I mean, she put like dirty Kleenex or something in there, like used tissues. So it's fine, but you know, be aware. Don't just toss your belongings there so it's easily accessible to you. You want it to be, your valuables to be hard to get at in your bag.
Yeah. And so on that point, having a couple of travel logs is really important. So if you've got your big backpack on your back, when you're putting it into the bus and even leaving it around the hostel, it really helps to have it locked up. Not that the locks are really that foolproof, but stops pickpocketers and also just makes it's kind of like if you're not the easiest person to steal from, your chances of getting stolen from are go way down. It's like the idea of, you know, you don't have to be able to outrun a bear. You just have to be able to outrun your friends.
Such a terrible, terrible idea. It's true though. I mean, you need to look out for your stuff for sure. Travel locks too. I mean, if you're in any sort of busy market, you can always lock up the bag that's on your back if it's a small day pack and just keep a little bit of cash in your pockets. I went to a market with some people I was in Bali in Ubud, and that's what they did. They just had like enough cash for bartering in their pockets. You know, it's not so much that if they got it stolen, it's like, oh my God, I'm broke. You know, it's the equivalent of like $30, but all of the valuables were locked up in her bag. So I thought that was a pretty good idea.
Mm-hmm. And then continuing on with bags, remember when we got to Ecuador, learning kind of about how much stuff people steal on buses from bags. If you have your bag on the floor, if you have your bag on the overhead compartment, if you have it on the floor, people from behind, someone might sit behind you and go under to take your stuff. So the key point there is just if you're on like a bus with a lot of local people depends on the country, but it seems like kind of Colombia, Ecuador, Bolivia, Peru, keeping that bag on your lap.
I'd say Brazil as well.
Brazil for sure as well.
Yeah, keeping the bag on your lap. And, you know, if you don't have anything valuable in your bag, like if your bag has, you know, an old jacket that you've worn hundreds of times that you're not really too attached to and like a book that you don't really care about, sure, you know, put it on the floor, toss it up above. I think it's always, you know, just being aware that if you've got stuff that you don't want to lose, that you need to really monitor that. We met a guy in Keto, he just fell asleep on a bus. Him and his girlfriend both did, and the people behind him just, they reached underneath the bags, unzipped the backpacks, took their passports and money out, and then zipped them back up. And so they didn't even realize that their stuff had got stolen until they were well off the bus. And there's no way of tracking those people then. It's not even like you can run after them to try and get your stuff back.
And that's a really common story of the people, you're on a bus, you fall asleep, and then your stuff gets stolen, and you don't even know because they don't actually take your bag. They just take the stuff out of it.
Yeah, and when we did an overnight bus in Bolivia, Ryan actually put our passports on his body, and then we put the rest of our valuables in my bag, locked that bag, and then I actually, I was sleeping, and I slept with, my foot through, I guess, the armhole of the bag, so that if somebody was to try to take it, it's going to pull on my foot first, and then it's locked, so they can't get into there quickly. So, just stuff like that, and it just... Getting stuff stolen is a hassle. If you get your passport stolen, you have to stay in a certain city until you can get your next passport. All buses in Southeast Asia as well as South America require you to show photo ID, like a passport. So it's really difficult if you do get that sort of stuff stolen. If you get your credit cards and your debit cards stolen, you have to call, home. You have to cancel those cards. Then what are you going to pay with? You have to get money transfers. It's just a huge hassle. So for the amount of work that it takes to keep your stuff safe, I think it's really worth it to take those precautionary measures.
Yeah. And I think having a passport holder, one of those pouchy things, especially on a bus when you're just going to be sitting there sleeping, it's just a perfect way to keep your important stuff safe.
Yeah. And so you travel on a bus or a train, you're cautious there. It's also important to be really cautious when you're getting in and out of cabs and being aware of what sort of cabs you are taking.
Well, cabs seem to be much more scammy than buses and trains. Maybe less common theft, but more severe when it does happen.
Yeah. So we would recommend, if you can, organizing some sort of a transfer from wherever you're staying so that somebody can pick you up that's reliable from the airport or the train station or the bus station. Sometimes it's a little bit more money, but I think it's worth it not to get into a car with a stranger that you don't know what they're going to do. We heard in Colombia tons of scams, the cab drivers will, take you to an ATM and basically hold you hostage there as you take out money.
Yeah, so that's a commonly purported scam called the $1 Million Ride, which I feel it's so sensational that it gets kind of pushed out. So I don't know, how worried you need to be about that, because yeah, I don't know what I'm getting at there, but yeah, part of me is if you read about it, you don't need to be that afraid. I think when I first got to Colombia, I had a level of fear and worry that wasn't really in line with the situation. But
yeah, I think it does happen though. So it's
the method that everyone told us and then we followed, was just to always call a cab company. Don't just take the random cab on the street, because there are those scam cabs don't really, usually it's someone who's just driving the car that looks like a cab. It's not actually a cab. Mm-hmm. So if you call the cab company, your cab comes to the door of your hostel, picks you up. Then you have a level of security in the fact that that cab company's reputation is kind of on the line, and that driver is linked up to a company instead of just being some sort of rogue guy.
Just a random person with a taxi sign. Yeah, it's good too when you're in hostels, because oftentimes the person who is running the hostel will call for you. And I feel they have a reputation to uphold. So they want their guests to have a good experience getting from point A to point B. So they don't, they wouldn't reuse a taxi company that scammed their guests. And so then it seems like you can get a safer experience by going that way, just because there's a little bit of reputation and business on the line that way.
Yeah. And I would say it seems like most places, like most bus stations and airports, you usually can get the cabs there seem to be kind of vetted a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I remember in particular hearing a lot of terrible things about the cabs in Arequipa in Peru.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of them that are fake, and you can get into problems with those. So that's kind of the way you need to deal with that there, is make sure you're always calling a cab company.
Yeah, and even with that, if you call the cab or your hostel arranges for it and they've given you a price, it's really important before you ever get in any cab to confirm that price. So whether or not it's a cab that you grab off the street, or it's a cab that's been called for you, or it's an airport pickup, always confirm the price and negotiate before you get into the cab, because once you're already in there, if they're not happy with the price, they're driving you. So you can get really sort of screwed over that way. So definitely always negotiate beforehand.
Yeah, and this is actually something that we kind of fell victim to, where we got into a cab and then started moving and started negotiating, and it ended up being way more expensive than we thought. Mm-hmm. I think we might have gotten one where I thought we agreed to a total rate and it was a per capita rate. So that's another thing to make sure if you say we're going here and they say, okay, that'll be like 1,000 pesos or something, make sure it's total. Because in South America, especially, a lot of cab drivers have this kind of illogical reasoning about, oh, I'll make this trip from A to B for 1,000 pesos if there's one person in the car, but if there's two people in the car, it'll be 2,000 pesos.
Yeah, it's really weird.
It's like mind-boggling. It doesn't really make any sense because the cost would be the same, but maybe, I don't know, maybe it makes sense in their heads. But always make sure to negotiate a price per person, because that's a main factor that cabbies can be deceptive about.
Yeah, so just clarify when they say a price, if it's like one person or for both, and just that you're happy with the price before you get in, and make sure that it's like set, because I feel like there's a few times where it's like, we've set a lower price, they've set a higher price, and then it's like we kind of get in and then we're like, okay, so this price, and they're like, no. So just make sure that they're pretty set on it beforehand.
Yeah, and because when you're standing on the sidewalk, you've got a lot of bargaining power. When you're in the back seat of a moving car, you don't have very much bargaining power.
Yeah, you basically have none at that point. And I think, too, that's a lot of times where when we were talking about that scam, the $1 million taxi, I think that's how a lot of people get into that, is like the taxi driver will just like drive around and around and around. And even if a taxi driver wants to use the meter, I'd almost say just set on a price, because they can just do that, especially if they're taking you to like a hostel, or you're in the city for the first time, or you're going somewhere that you don't know, which is generally the case when you're traveling.
Yeah, and there's quite a few places like Buenos Aires, especially, and a few others in South America. And I think these scams apply to developing countries all over the place. But make sure you watch the meter while you're in the cab. Because if you are running on the meter, sometimes the cabbies will do funky things and just jack up the price all of a sudden. And you'll be like, well, I thought it seems way more expensive than it was the last second I was paying attention. So when you're not paying attention, that's when you're going to get taken advantage of.
Yeah, for sure.
So when you're in a cab, try to keep a sense of direction of, okay, where am I going? What streets am I seeing? And also, where's the meter? What's the meter doing if you are taking a metered ride? Yeah,
for sure. And I know, like, when I was in Bali, the meter was cheaper. Like, the cab drivers would try to set a price that was higher than the meter. So we'd always try to get the meter if we were taking a cab. But just kind of like feel that one out, like ask people at the place that you're staying what the cabs are like, ask the people who run the hostel, just try and read, blogs or Wiki Travel or Lonely Planet type thing to just see, because every place is a little bit different.
Yeah, and that's the main thing. Like, if you listen to the local people, the people at reception at your hostel, and don't feel like afraid to ask questions, like, if you say, oh, is it safe to go walk around at night? And sometimes people are like, yeah, of course it's safe. What do you think this is? Like a third world country? But if you ask questions, people who live there know the best ways to avoid these scams and how to be safe.
Yeah, for sure.
And I want to say I was in America over the last weekend and had the pleasure of taking Uber for the first time and having like an experience with that. And it's just like, if you don't know what Uber is, you should know what Uber is, but it's like a car service that you could use your app on the phone for.
Don't make people feel bad because they don't know what Uber is. Just share your knowledge with them.
So I know I was on Uber's website a while ago, and I saw in Colombia, in Cali, in Medellin, in I think Bogota as well, Uber is available, and I think a few other places. I know it's Buenos Aires. I think Uber is available, and getting outside of like the taxi system is one of the most like corrupt, backwards markets in the world because of a whole bunch of weird regulations and licensing schemes. But if you have the option to take Uber in any of these countries, it's amazing, and definitely a much better way to go because the drivers are way, way more responsible.
It's because it works off reviews, right? So they have like a reputation to uphold.
Yeah, they have a reputation to uphold, and you know your driver, like you can see their name.
So there's not like funny business, like your money goes directly towards them.
Yeah, and for example, where I was, a girl took an Uber, forgot her phone in the Uber. Instead of having to go like phone a taxi company, and the taxi company is just going to never find your phone for you. Mm-hmm. She was able to log into her Uber account, see what her driver's name was, message her driver. Her driver came and brought her back her phone.
That's amazing. That's really, really cool.
Yeah. So definitely keep an eye while you're traveling, because Uber may not be in your city or state. And so maybe you haven't used it, but when you're traveling, you can sign up and use it in the cities you're in, and it's definitely a good way to go.
Cool. That's awesome.
And then another scam we want to talk about, just because it's common enough, is, I don't know what you'd call it. People call it like a mustard trick or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
It's when you're walking around, to distract you, someone will... sometimes it's like a team thing, like maybe someone spits on you and then people come to help you, and those people who are helping you clean yourself up are stealing your stuff.
Yeah.
Or the same thing with mustard, same thing with like bird shit.
Yeah, I think they do it with like paint,
all kinds of stuff.
It's big in markets, and it's big in big public spaces like cathedral squares and like that sort of thing. Yeah. There's a lot of people.
So,
and if you feel something land on you, the thing is so what they want to do is they want to hit your backpack. So they want you to take your backpack off. So as you're transferring it from like, maybe you're being really cautious, like, oh, I don't want to put it down. But as you're transferring it from one arm to the other, somebody else runs by and grabs your bag out of your hands, mm-hmm. as you're trying to figure out what happens.
So how do you deal with that in a safe way? Or like what's the main way to avoid getting hit like that?
My suggestion is if you're going to a public space like a market or something, I wouldn't take a backpack if I didn't have to.
Right.
No bag is ideal, or I'll take a purse that literally has a bit of cash in it.
And that kind of hints at our general like way of thinking about going out, whether it be during the day or at night. If you're somewhere where there are a lot of muggings and robberies, a good way to think about it is like when you're going out, okay, if I was going to get mugged, just kind of prepare as you go out as if you were going to get mugged.
It's like, okay, I'm going to go for dinner at 7 and then I'm going to get mugged at 8. Like, what do I not want to have on me?
Yeah. And so sometimes you're, like for us, for example, we'd think about, it'd be nice to be able to take some photos of this place we're going. We're going out partying in like Rio. But, people get mugged like crazy. So maybe we only bring one camera if we really want photos, and we bring like the shittier one. Mm-hmm. Or maybe we just don't bring it at all, and we say it's not even worth
potentially losing like other photos for. My cell phone almost never left the hostel, almost nowhere at night in South America. It's just not worth it. Like most of the time I'm using Wi-Fi is like the hostel anyways. Like nobody's messaging me. There's no real need to actually have my phone on me. Not taking a ton of cash. I would almost never withdraw cash at night. So there's no reason to have like a credit card or a debit card on me.
And then, so with the card thing, the thing or the method I use is keeping at least one card in a separate place all the time. So if you were to lose your big bag, you wouldn't be screwed. If you were to lose your small bag, you wouldn't be screwed. If you were to get mugged, you wouldn't be screwed because you've always got a backup option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. That's a great tip and trick, I think. I think, you know, when you're walking around as a foreigner in a third world country, people, I feel like people know when you've got a lot of stuff on you. I don't know what it is, but I feel like you're just, at least for me, I'm way more relaxed. If I just go out with no bag, I've got like, you know, $10 in my pocket. I don't have anything on me. So it's like if somebody were to mug me, it just doesn't matter. And I feel like when you're just relaxed because you're not worried about it, it just doesn't happen to you.
Yeah. Well, it's also,
I mean, that might be
if you're a mugger, you're not going to mug. It's obviously a risky activity to engage in. You're going to try to find the best reward. So if you see someone with a backpack or with a nice camera on their neck or with gold chains, nice jewelry, that's a much more appealing target than someone who looks like they're broke.
Yeah.
And so, but that said, like it's a lot nicer when you realize, like, okay, if I got mugged, minor inconvenience, cool story.
Yeah.
Maybe slightly dangerous. And then you just enjoy yourself significantly more instead of like, you know, peering out of the corner of your eyes, wondering who's behind you, all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah, and wondering like, oh, are they touching my bag? Are they going to grab my purse? Like this and that. So it's better to just be more prepared for that. Leave your valuables at home or at your hostel or in your safe. Yeah, and just be smart. I think that's the biggest thing, and use common sense. If you feel like you're in a dangerous situation, try and get out as fast as you can.
Yeah, and so like the main principles I'd say would be ask questions. Don't be afraid of looking dumb or like I don't know what you would be afraid of, but you know, ask, oh, is it safe? Can I get mugged? And then kind of follow the convention of just be faster than your friends. Like, so make your bag the hardest one to steal. Bring less stuff. Make yourself less of a target than other people you see around you.
Yeah, and try to stick to that too. You'll like if you're out traveling like Southeast Asia or South America, like a lot of people just bring their phones around, and a lot of people that is their camera, and they'll just hold them up, and it's really easy to get caught up in, oh, well, they're taking photos with their camera. Like, I kind of want to do the same thing. You know, if you're pretty attached to your camera or your phone and you don't want to get it stolen, and it's kind of your lifeline to getting in touch with your friends and family back home, maybe just stick to what, you know, is best for you, which is maybe taking a different camera with you that's a little bit cheaper that you don't care about as much.
Yeah.
And just, you know, not getting caught up in, you know, oh, well, so-and-so is bringing their phone to the bar, so it's fine if I do it. Or, oh, so-and-so's got a bunch of money. Like, it's okay. I'll just take my money too. Yeah.
And then learning from the experiences of others. I remember like the first day we got into Bogota, there was a Korean guy there who was telling us about how he had his backpack stolen at a cafe because he just put it down by the foot of his bag. His passport was gone. He had to stay in Bogota longer to get a passport renewed. Mm-hmm. So that kind of was like, okay, don't do that.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, and for sure, just remembering, you know, those situations happen, like they happen, you know, people get stuff stolen in Canada and the US as well, but just remembering that those situations do happen, but there are ways to sort of prevent them from happening.
Yeah, and then obviously if your stuff gets stolen, don't blame us. It's not our problem.
Yeah. And just remember, it's just material items at the end of the day. It doesn't really matter. It's not our fault. All right. So
we take no legal responsibility for our safety tips.
But they work.
But yeah, we'd love to hear from any of you guys about maybe if you've been mugged before, what you've learned from that, how that experience was for you. If you
have you traveled since? Are you terrified?
Yeah, or if you have any good safety tips that we missed, or if you feel like our safety tips are not very safe.
Or if they're the best ever. Yeah. www.theworldwanderspodcast.com. That's not that's not our website. www.theworldwanders.com. Shoot us a message if you'd like. We're on Facebook and Twitter.
Ciao.
Bye.